All right. We are here. We're a little late this morning. Can anybody hear me? Who is in the comments? Oh, 4 people. 4 comments. Good morning, AC and Lucas. Okay, the faithful, the always faithful. All right, I'm going to fix some things here. All right. Today we are talking about the death of pop culture, possibly the death of culture itself. I'm going to put up something here. I was listening to something. How you doing, Lucas? Good to see you. So I was listening to something by Matt Walsh, and he talked about the death of pop culture. And I'm just going to go ahead and play this and then kind of throw in my 2 cents on what he had to say. It's pretty interesting, actually. And I'm going to put it up where I want it to start here. Right about there.
I spent $500 testing every eye bag shrinking tool. Here's the only one that actually worked. I've had permanent eye bags for years, and
Okay.
Because something else happened in 2007 that would prove to be a much more determinative factor. The iPhone was, of course, released in the US on June 29th, 2007. And again, it is startling to look at a list of the greatest films and TV shows of this century and see how many of them were packed in and produced from the year 2000 right up until the release of the iPhone, and how quickly everything drops off almost from that moment precisely, or within a year or so of it. The iPhone came out, social media proliferated alongside it. 2007, only about 23% of American adults had ever used social media. Twitter had only just been launched. TikTok didn't exist. Instagram didn't exist. Today, of course, basically everyone uses social media, basically every waking moment of the day. Now, here's the point. As our lives have become increasingly centered around these devices, centered and condensed into these little glowing boxes, we have lost something very important. We no longer have a shared cultural experience, what some have called the monoculture, or what you might just call mainstream culture. The monoculture began its march to extinction in 2007. Today, the march is over. Process is complete. There is no shared culture.
Okay. Matt Walsh is never one to mince words. Yeah, MySpace was the thing too. Yeah, MySpace kind of took off. And that's at the point when I remember back then I got I used to get it from a friend of mine. Several people used to do this, but one guy in particular used to send out newsletters on his family every year with news of his kids, right? I got a little glare here. I'm going to do one thing about that. How's that? Knock the glare down. He used to send out a newsletter, like a paper newsletter that we got in the mail. And then I remember checking my email, and all of a sudden there was something from Dave, and it was on MySpace, and it was the same thing, but except it was on the computer. And I thought, this is odd. Is this where the world is going? And of course, that is exactly where the world was going. The reason I chose this topic, so MySpace was the thing that I first got introduced to. And then I remember I was looking for an old friend of mine, and someone said, just go on Facebook. Everybody's on Facebook. Okay, I've heard of Facebook. I went on. This is around 2009, 2010, I think. So as usual with these things, I was late to the game. But that was 15 years ago. Okay. And 2010, again, the older you get, you cannot believe how long ago dates were that you remember. But I mean, 2010 should have been just yesterday, but it was 15 years ago, right? And the iPhone came out, 17 years ago? Excuse me, 18 years ago. I think it's 18. So the thing that the reason I chose this is because this week I flew to Phoenix and back, San Diego to Phoenix, which I do once in a while. I have some properties there, and I see it every time I fly. But this time, I guess I just noticed it. And when Matt came out with this video a couple days ago, I happened to catch it, and the two things kind of clicked on for me, because on this trip, and again, it's a short flight, it's not even an hour, but you're obviously in the plane for more than an hour, and there was zero conversation. This is usually, I think usually there's some conversations going on the plane, a few that I overhear, but going there and back, I don't remember hearing a single conversation. Now the planes weren't full. Actually, coming back, the plane was half empty. But at the same time, every single person on the plane had a device, really, except me. I was napping. And that might, obviously not every single person. I couldn't see the people in the front, but every person around me was glued to their phone. And it wasn't for work, because up there, maybe it was. Maybe they could get the internet up there. But most people were watching a movie. And it got me thinking, this in no way, shape, or form would this has happened 20 years ago, or even 18 years ago, even when the iPhone came out. It took a while for it to grab a hold. And I saw another article. I was doing some research on this, and this article stated the iPhone coming out in 2007 was huge, but the biggest earthquake, the biggest social earthquake on this, or the most, I think they called it, the seismic shift, was in 2010 when Apple came out with the iPhone 4 and the front-facing camera. And the author of this article is saying that was the seismic shift. That was the thing that caused social media to absolutely take off. And it opened up this culture, this fragmented culture, this self-centered culture, this phone-centered culture, social media-centered culture. This is what kicked off the selfie. It's what kicked off Instagram. It's Snapchat, all these other things that now just are like the air we breathe or the water we swim in. And it caused this kind of myopic, silent culture that we're in. I'm on a plane that's silent. 25 years ago, if you were on a plane, people would have been talking. Maybe some people are reading, whatever. There was always people like that. I read a book or a magazine on the flight, but there was some kind of interaction. There was some kind of acknowledgement of the people around you. You had to acknowledge that they're, and now you really only acknowledge people when you're on planes, when you have to get up to go use the restroom. So it was those two things. But what Matt is saying in this is he's talking about pop culture, and the front-facing camera was culture itself. And when I gave this, I wanted to have the word pop in kind of parentheses, because I wanted to separate the two. Pop culture, what Matt was talking about, probably did die right with the iPhone. And a lot of things he goes on to mention a lot of movies: No Country for Old Men, There Will Be Blood, movies like Wall-E, or the one he this was Ratatouille. He mentioned was a great movie. Apocalypto, those kinds of things, Gran Torino, and those he says that those kind of films, those kind of movies are not made anymore. The death of the comedy movie is something that he laments, and movies have just turned into either remakes of old franchises that are really, really pathetic remakes. You think of the Terminator franchise or the Ghostbusters franchise. Oh my goodness. Did they ever mess that up? And even Star Wars is probably the biggest one that everybody laments. It has just been completely demolished and I don't know if you could blame that on the um, on the iPhone, but there's this kind of, we've become so fragmented, we don't have a shared culture anymore. So movies now are made to assert almost like a personality. Think of Star Wars, someone like Kathleen Kennedy. She made that franchise to kind of promote her personal ideas. She had no um, loyalty to the original story or to the fan base or to what they call the canon, right? She said, "This is what I'm going to say. I'm going to make it in my image," right? So we went from that core shared value, like, and Star Wars would probably be the biggest um, example of everyone having a shared culture. Everybody knew Star Wars when Star Wars came out. It had its roots way back in the 70s, so it connected generations. And I always complain that I have friends, or I know guys who have trained their children more on Star Wars canon than they do Christian canon. And if there's ever was an alternate religion or something that bound the culture together, maybe even separate from religion, but that was almost a faith that someone put all their time and energy and idealism into, it was Star Wars. And it is pretty much this culture of meism, and I'll express my my thoughts and I'll impose them on you because I'm the most important thing in the world. It would be Star Wars, the demise of Star Wars. That is the basic root of it, or that small strain of ideology that says the future is female and that all these male characters don't need to either be replaced by women or they need to be broken. Like Luke Skywalker was broken in that the latest one where he was just a pathetic figure, right? Lucas, what do you got? 2001 is when all pop culture started to collide and mix, and nothing feels authentic anymore. 60s had its flavor, and the 70s so on. There has been no new flavors since. Yeah, boy, they did have flavors, didn't they? I started in the 60s. The 60s had a flavor that I didn't care for. 70s had a flavor that I didn't care for. But there was definitely shared culture in all of that. And that's, Matt Walsh is saying that pop culture peaked in 2007, 2008, 2009. I don't necessarily know. A lot of those movies and TV shows that he's talking about were very well done, but they are also very much a break from, if you look at the content of those movies and TV shows, things like, say, The Sopranos, that was so ultra violent. I guess Game of Thrones, maybe it was a little bit later, but those weren't things that the entire culture could share because they were kind of nasty, and they're very violent. They had a lot of sexual content, not something, it wasn't like something like, say, when I was a kid, the first thing to come on TV that I really remember everybody having a shared experience was the TV show Roots, with the miniseries Roots. And everybody watched Roots, and Roots was a redeeming story. It was a lot of white guilt, and it wasn't necessarily historically accurate. But Roots was the point where I haven't talked about this in a while, but Roots was the point where everybody, at least most of white people, it was kind of the end of the civil rights era when everyone finally got it. Okay. Everyone at the end of Roots was like, yeah, we get it. Okay. Everybody's on the same page now when it came to race relations with Roots. And at that point, as I've said before, the people who thrived on racial discord couldn't have that anymore. So they had to, that's when victimhood culture really, I think, took seed. And sorry, because certain people cannot have race relations being okay and everybody being on the same page. But Roots was a redeeming story. It was a positive story. There wasn't a lot of sensational, gratuitous stuff in it. A lot of the movies and TV shows that Matt goes on to talk about had gratuitous things there that aren't, what Christians would say, what what you intake. Um, be careful what your eyes takes in, because we had already lost that. We had lost kind of that Judeo-Christian flavor way back in the 60s, and it didn't really take place for a few years, but things started getting more and more crude, more and more crass, more and more gratuitous. So, but they were very well done, and they were, a lot of the movies and TV shows he talks about were very well done, very well produced, and they all had a message that was kind of hidden within all the gratuitous stuff, which social commentators always can see, but the public can't. All the public really can see is the gratuitous stuff. So, but he talks about the iPhone, this little thing being the thing that kicked it off. And I don't know that it necessarily kicked it off, but it definitely embodied it and made it. It was kind of the Pandora's box that finally opened. Okay. The Pandora's box itself wasn't evil, but what it released was evil. So, and what the other author I saw said, that wasn't really complete until that front-facing camera came. And then all of a sudden social media became the national pastime. And social media is not a unifying thing. You stay connected for sure, but you're only connected to who you want to be connected to. And you only share in what you or your little microcosm of the world shares. And I don't really share anything with the purple-haired lady that was across the aisle from me, whose social media feed is completely different than mine. And I am aware too of the incongruity of this. Here I am online on social media talking to a bunch of people. I'm using a computer because I'm too old to handle doing everything through my phone. I still do most things through my computer, but you guys are all watching on your phones. I think at one point Carrie said she had 2 phones that she does. So here I'm using social media to tell you that social media has basically torn our pop culture and our shared common culture to smithereens. And as Matt said, the job is complete. And I think he might be right, because we now as a society are so starkly divided. Let's see. AC, so true, Joel. The flip phone was tossed to the side when the iPhone came out. Yeah, it was. I never even had a flip phone. But yeah. And, people don't talk on their phones anymore. What's more irritating than actually getting a phone call from someone? You got a text, right? If you talk to anyone at all. So, and there's even a fear in young people of actually speaking live to a person. There's the anxiety of going to a job interview that young people have, because they actually have to interact with someone on a personal level, not through a phone, not through messaging, not through Snapchat, not through, Instagram or whatever it is. So I saw a sign. My wife and I were driving, and someone had a bumper sticker on it that said "Sweet Meteor of Death 2024." So if you don't know what SMOD is, Sweet Meteor of Death, it's something I haven't seen in a while, but it used to be a popular meme that the only hope for mankind is the meteor of death to come from outer space and just wipe us all out so we can start anew. But one thing I was thinking, the worst thing that could happen to us and the best thing that can happen to us maybe is I was thinking of that balloon that overflew from China a couple of years ago. And I remember thinking, what if that balloon had a EMP pulse in it, and some kind of device that when it got over Kansas detonated and took out all the electronics in our country? What would have happened then? And would that have been the best thing, the worst thing to happen to our culture, but also the best thing? To force us then to be confronted with one another, having to work together with one another, having to have a shared culture, again, having to have shared values, having to have a shared goals. So instead of the sweet meteor of death, I was thinking maybe we'd have the sweet EMP pulse of reset. Is there another way of resetting? But there's really not. Short of that catastrophe, which is silly to even to wish that on anything, because that would be a tragedy. But we're in this now. We have this culture that is completely split, and pop culture that is completely split. So I wanted to put this in biblical terms. I was thinking of Proverbs 29. Just as a simple proverb the Bible has, and it says, and let me put it up here real quickly. This is Proverbs 29:18. And here we are. And we all know it. Where there is no vision, the people perish. But he that keepeth the law, happy is he. Now, this is talking about a vision from God, actually. Okay. Keepeth the law, God's law. But it's something that a people all share in common, right? And that has been broken, and it came from this little device. It had been building for years, obviously. I think the last time we really had a shared goal or a shared vision probably was World War II. And there were people obviously that didn't get on board with World War II, but they were very few and far between. And that success was so total, and the effort was so total, and the society they created afterwards, it's a paradox. It set the stage for the fragmenting of our country and the loss of a shared goal and a shared vision. So where do we go from here? And how as Christians do we react to that? Because in a lot of ways, this has fragmented the church. This kind of thing has fragmented the church too. You have people who listen to their own teachings, their own online preachers. Online, that's one thing that COVID did to us. I think COVID, if the iPhone was kind of the death knell of the unification of our society, COVID was the final nail in that coffin. Or maybe the iPhone was the final nail in the coffin and COVID was the actual burial of it. I don't know. But the state of our culture now is so fragmented, and we have so little in common with each other, unless we're part of the same little, same little microcosm of a world that we have within ourselves and our phones and our social media. It affects our ability to become effective followers of God, of Christ, effective Christians, an effective body of believers. We talk about, the Bible talks about the body of Christ. Paul talks about it. The eye can't say to the hand, I have no need of you. The foot can't say to the ear, we're separate. We don't need each other. But yet we have so many separate, the church itself is so fragmented along with society. The emotional effects of these things, the emotional effects of social media addiction that I haven't talked about yet, cause anxiety. The Bible says, be anxious for nothing, but in all things, make your requests be known. But we have invested ourselves so much in this anxiety creating device. How can we not be anxious? If we get all of our information, all of our worldview, all of our Bible reading, all of our music, if everything comes from this little device, how can we not be anxious? Can we as disciples, we as Christians, we as followers of Christ, how can we not be anxious when we keep going back to the anxiety well and taking another drink. AC, what you got? You're right. Now people control and they are so bold, but in person, they may not engage. Yeah. So, yeah. And it also creates a bit of impersonality, I guess, if that's a word. Okay. It's not personal face to face. I don't think I would say most of what I say on this little chat session we have. I don't say this stuff face to face with people. I can, but this is my chance to say, hey, this is my opinion, right? But I don't do this face to face. But it gives you a certain amount of freedom because I have this little faithful group of followers that I can talk to. And this does scratch my itch of teaching. I have a gift of teaching that I don't use much. And this gives me that opportunity. So for all the good things, for all the opportunity this gives, nothing in life, everything in life has opportunity cost, right? What is the opportunity cost of using these devices, of using social media? What has been the opportunity cost for our society, for our families, for our children? What have they lost? What don't you do because you spend so much time in social media? Who do you not interact with? What exercise do you not get? With children, when they just spend all their time, scrolling? How am I going to do scrolling? I've heard all kinds of stories. I saw it myself with my nephew's daughter. She went up to the TV and started seeing if she could scroll the TV, right? How many empty playgrounds are there out there? How many empty bowling alleys? Whatever you would want to say. We don't interact much anymore because for the most part, everybody's on their device in all their free time. They say that the average person's on their phone 4 hours a day. Well, that must mean they're working the rest of the time and can't be on their phones, because if they could be on their phones every waking hour, 16 hours a day, they would. I'm sure they stop to do certain work. They stop to drive. Hopefully they stop to eat. Hopefully they stop to sleep. Hopefully. But it's something that no one would have seen coming 20 years ago, even until that time when this little device was introduced, and it was a miracle, and it's a magnificent tool, right? It can be used for all kinds of things, but it's also a self-perpetuating machine that when social media came along, it now exists to perpetuate itself and to make you feel like you need more and more and more social media consumption. And the algorithm that's driving this are these things. The algorithms that are driving our social media are driving our lives, and they're also driving our spiritual lives. Calvin said that the human mind is an idol factory. We're always looking for something to fill that God-shaped void in our lives and put up an idol. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is the idol of our time. The iPhone has become the idol. It has replaced the vision that the people have. Hopefully, it doesn't mean we're going to perish soon, but it has put us in a position where we're fragmented. People in the church are fragmented. We listen to different things. We have different worlds, different worldviews. The worldviews, instead of being centered around something that's bigger than ourselves, are now centered around what the algorithm tells us we want. Okay. And I think tomorrow I'll get into AI. The whole kicker on this now is going to be AI. And I'll probably play a little more of what Matt said about how AI is going to kick in and affect this. iPhone is a Tower of Babel rebuilt on a budget of Scribble. Okay. A glass idol. Very correct. So now that I've taken up half an hour, get off your idols and go do something. I'm going to see if I can go do something. I will see you tomorrow. We'll talk more about this. Thanks for the good comments. and we will see you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.